So we're going to discuss right now addiction and mental health epidemic has greatly influenced Oceanside's homeless crisis. State and local governments are spending billions on homelessness. Many think more affordable housing, jobs, and rent control will solve homelessness. Even in 2010, well before the opiate epidemic, the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development reported that more than half of the homeless population was either in the throes of addiction or mentally ill. Affordable housing is not the problem. According to a U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development report, 45% of homeless people suffer from mental illness. A University of Pennsylvania report found that about half suffer from alcohol or drug dependence. In addition, a U.S. Conference of Mayors report in 2014 revealed that only 18% of the homeless population are employed. That means that most people, the cost of housing doesn't really matter. They simply can't afford it. Because they simply can't afford it. If you don't work, how can you ever afford affordable housing? What politicians must acknowledge is that the real cause of most homelessness and the prevalence of mental health illness and substance abuse in the homeless community. More jobs won't solve homelessness. Here's some statistics that we've just come out of. Obviously, the COVID-19 pandemic has influenced this, but just as of October 2019, we hit 50-year lows on unemployment. And here's some articles from even the San Diego Union Tribune. Some feel that rent control will help solve homelessness. And I want to go over some facts in reference to rent control. Proposition 10, which was rent control. It failed in 2018 by almost 20 points. California voters rejected rent control. Governor Gavin Newsom signed Assembly Bill 1482, enacting rent control in California. From his perspective, it was an attempt to solve homelessness. Here's why rent control is not a contributing factor and won't help the homeless crisis. First, the law ignores the fact that states' epicenters of homelessness, including Los Angeles and San Francisco, already have rent control on the books. And they've actually been on the books for many years. And they're more stringent than the one the governor recently passed. In San Francisco, for example, studies show the caps have sharply decreased the supply of rental housing, driving up rents citywide instantly by 5%. That's because landlords demolished the properties and ended up building new properties to circumvent the process. Rent control has been a proven failure in addressing housing problems. It prompts landlords to convert their properties most of the time into owner-occupied homes and deters investment in the housing market, aggravating the shortage that caused the issue in the first place. If rent control helps reduce homelessness, why is the problem so prevalent in the very cities that already have it? And how is extending it to the rest of the state going to address the issue? We have an unchecked addiction crisis. Right now, I'm going to talk about Proposition 47, which is a state law or a state ballot measure that passed by the voters, labeled as the Safe Neighborhoods and Schools Act. It explicitly reduced felony drug possession and felony theft to misdemeanors in an anemic attempt to reduce overcrowding prisons. But what it has done is it allows for open drug use just about everywhere, including our neighborhoods, schools, and the homeless addicts are now free to openly use meth and heroin anywhere with little fear of reprisal. Prop 47 has tied the hands of law enforcement by reducing the severity of drug possession and theft to a mere slap on the wrist. Amid the festering addiction crisis, police departments across the state are now rendered impotent. The utter lack of legal consequences from Prop 47 has made California a tremendous draw for addicts and dealers alike. More importantly, business is booming for the cartels just across our border. According to the Courthouse News Service, the Sinaloa cartel is the leading player in a poly-drug trade that has largely shifted south of the border. Cartels produce and distribute massive quantities of meth into the U.S. through a route that starts in Southern California. I'm sure you've heard of El Chapo and the family and drug lord group. According to the USA Today, last year, more than 90% of the drug seizures happened in San Diego's port of entry, where millions of cars drive through every day. There are, in a nutshell, there are no longer any meaningful consequences for openly using or dealing illicit drugs in our neighborhoods and in our streets. As a result, the homeless issue has fermented into a full-blown addiction epidemic. And here's some quotes from both a police officer in Riverside and also a justice. Pretty much acknowledging that our law enforcement and our judicial systems, they don't have the teeth or the resources available to help those that need intervention on the streets. There's an 80-20 rule that I'd like to go over with you guys. And this is the rule. It is 80% of the homeless population have the capacity to fully recover and reintegrate back into society if appropriate intervention and structured pathways are provided. 20% of the homeless population, they do suffer from permanent mental and physical disabilities, and government will be taking care of them for the rest of their life. Hence, and we'll talk about this more, the appropriate population for housing first policies, which we will go into shortly. Housing first for all has failed. Now, when most of us think of housing first, we just think of a concept of getting somebody in a house first or soon, but it's so much more than that. And it's very important that we understand what is tied to this policy decision of housing first. So what is housing first? It's a policy tied to government funding that seeks to house anyone experiencing homelessness with little to no accountability. It seeks to house homeless in affordable units with average costs of upwards of $450,000 per unit to build, puts limitations on local jurisdictions and nonprofits that use housing first policy funds. For example, they're not allowed to drug test the individuals. There's no requirement. There is no work requirements. So drug addicts and alcoholics who, if they were on a pathway that would help them into recovery and back out into society, if they are pushed into a housing first model, they can continue to use with no requirements to change their lifestyle or behavior, thus perpetuating this problem. And if you're an addict and now you bring children into the equation, you're in this apartment, but you're still struggling with your addiction, and now your children are gonna suffer those consequences. So it's actually perpetuating a multi-generational crisis. Local jurisdictions were not able to enforce our vagrancy laws. I often get asked, why don't you, arrest, or why don't you do this if they're setting up a tent? Isn't that illegal? Well, yes, our current code has anti-encampment laws or encampment laws. You can't just set up camp on public property. But what a lot of people aren't aware is that the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, it's a landmark 2019 decision in Boise, Idaho, limits the police department's ability to enforce Oceanside's code that prohibits against camping on public property if we do not have an available shelter bed. So the caveat is we cannot enforce our local laws and ordinances if we are unable to provide that individual that's breaking the law with a bed. And then also people setting up encampments on private property, which is not public, we can still cite them and remove their stuff And just as an example, in 2020, the city of Oceanside conducted 308 encampment details and removed over 327 tons of debris off of private property. Just as a disclosure, any illegal behavior should be reported to the Oceanside Police Department. Officers continue to respond to criminal activity, and for any emergency situation, call 911. All right, so we will hold off here, and we're going to now go into dealing with our panelists. So our first panelist that we're going to have talk is Mr. Paul Webster. And just for the sake of each panelist, this is to you panelists, why don't you go ahead and just introduce yourself and give a little bit of background before you go into your message. I just don't have an exact background and biography on all of you, so it's just better that you guys go ahead and take care of that. And just a reminder to unmute yourself before you start talking.
Thank you, Christopher. Thank you, Councilman Member Rodriguez. My name is Paul Webster. I am a advocate and a policy expert, a subject matter expert on homelessness. For the last year, I worked for the Department of Housing and Urban Development as a senior policy advisor on homelessness. Before that, I worked for a local homelessness assistance program for families called Solutions for Change. And before that, I worked in the United States Congress for about 12 years on a variety of issues. Currently, I am heading up a coalition called Hope Street Coalition. The Hope Street Coalition addresses the intersection of mental illness, drug addiction, and homelessness, because in my view, those populations, that population is the one that has the largest gap and is the largest one that is unserved by most of the federal and local programs with respect to housing people. Unfortunately, the federal government and the state of California have really pinned their hopes on this concept that affordable housing solves homelessness. And most people, when they drive through their communities and see encampments and see people who are in active drug addiction and who are in active psychosis, know inherently that affordable housing is not going to be able to solve underlying mental illness and addiction problems. So what I've been focusing on is really the challenges both from the homelessness assistance programs that that provide housing, but because of the way that the performance measures are forced down on communities, they don't usually are able to house a lot of the folks that are the most vulnerable. And that's why you see encampments growing. When you look at the federal data, there's been more money for homelessness assistance and housing than ever before. In fact, when you look at the capacity or the kinds of housing that we've created, both permanent supportive housing, rapid rehousing, we've had more capacity than ever before. We've seen about a 200% increase in funding for homelessness and a significant increase in capacity. The challenge, though, is that unsheltered homelessness has increased at the same time that funding and capacity has increased. So something is definitely not working. If we look at who is making up the unsheltered homeless population, Councilmember Rodriguez talked about a couple of statistics from HUD and other sources. Just a couple of years ago, 2019, UCLA did the largest survey nationally of the unsheltered population, and they found nearly 3/4 of the unsheltered population have at least have some kind of experience with mental illness and drug addiction. And the real challenge is that our current systems, our current policies are not providing the kinds of real assistance to treat people so that they can be stably housed and they can remain stably housed. When you look at the kind of humanitarian crisis that's going on in our streets, right now in San Francisco, about 2 people a day are dying from drug overdoses. At the same time in Los Angeles, 5 people a day are dying on the streets. This is not the kind of society that is really taking a hard and serious look at the humanitarian crisis on their streets. And when you look at when you understand some of the systemic barriers to what's happening with respect to those that are on our streets suffering, when you look at the travesty of our mental illness policies that cycles folks with mental illness, serious mental illness like schizophrenia and bipolar disorders, to emergency departments and jails and then the streets, and you see the federal and the state obstacles that prevent them from receiving the kind of treatment that they need, it really is a tragedy. So I created Hope Street Coalition so that folks like you can advocate for those folks who are suffering on the street, so we can start to change the policies, both the federal policies that cap the increase of capacity of psychiatric care and the state policies that prevent folks who are decompensating on our streets from being forced and conserved so that they can get the actual help they need. Right now, what's happening is that unless people are in such great state of psychosis that they're deemed to be a harm to themselves or a harm to others, there's no recourse that we can do as a society to help them get the kind of treatment and housing that they need. And these are just significant challenges. And when you look at the population that is increasing homelessness, not just here in California, but across the country, it's the unsheltered homelessness. So there is a direct connection between mental illness, drug addiction, and the kind of suffering that is going on in the street. I think we as a society need to we need to do better than understand that the narrative that affordable housing is going to solve all of these problems. And we need to start really focusing on the challenges to our mental illness policy, our challenges to our addiction treatment policies, and we need to get people the help that they need and allow people to receive the kind of treatment and allow communities to start improving, because we're actually starting to invest the right resources in the things that are actually going to long-term help improve communities, save lives, and save public costs. So if you have some questions, I'd love to read them in the chat or read them in the Q&A, and love to also address some of the issues on Housing First and how Housing First really makes it difficult for communities like Oceanside to provide the kind of resources necessary to address the unsheltered homelessness in their own community. Thank you very much, Councilmember Rodriguez.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And yeah, please stick around for Q&A toward the end. Right now, we're going to move to Ms. Linda Harris, who has a personal experience and testimony with her son. And it's very touching. And I just really want her to introduce herself, but also, her story, and allow the community to, kind of take a glimpse on the mental health dynamic that a lot of our homeless is also facing.
Well, hi, thank you so much for the opportunity to participate in the panel, Christopher. I appreciate it. And our story, our family's story, personifies what Paul just shared about our failed federal and state policies that create systemic barriers to get care for somebody, an adult child who becomes ill in the prime of their life. And what happened, I have a degree in public policy from Duke University, a master's, and I worked for a senator, and I worked on Capitol Hill as a lobbyist. I've worked in communications and private industry. My husband's in biotech. We are very educated people, and yet we could not help our son. And if you are a parent, you know what it's like when your kids are little and you take them to the doctor when they're sick and you take care of them. Well, when they turn 18, and that's about the time when some of these serious brain diseases surface, which in our society, we call them behavioral disorders, but they aren't, they're brain diseases. Then at that point, you have no power at all to force your child to go to a doctor. So our son, who was a great kid his whole life, sweet, nice, athletic, top of his class in high school, really good colleges. When he was a junior in college, he started exhibiting symptoms. We did not know what it was. So we brought him home from his out-of-state college, and we tried to figure out with some doctors what it was. We don't have these illnesses in our families, so we had really no idea what we were up against. So when we finally started seeing, what it was, we were like, oh, okay, well, we know this is a treatable brain disease. I mean, these diseases are treatable, and when they're treated correctly up front, you don't get downstream homelessness, jails, and all of the horrible things that happen to people who, through no fault of their own, get these illnesses. So anyway, our son, for about 10 years, it took 10 years. Think of this. Think of your own family. 10 years of hell to try to get our son the treatment he needed, all the while getting worse and worse, and being told by our PERT team, which is the police emergency response team, and the conservatorship office, because that's a route that you try to go when your kid is so sick they don't know they're sick. And 50% of all people that suffer from these psychotic disorders, schizophrenia, schizoaffective, bipolar, and depression with psychotic features, they cannot know that they're sick because the executive part, the frontal lobe in their brain, is affected. So it's like when you have a stroke. If you know somebody that's had a stroke, they often don't even understand that maybe their right hand doesn't work after they have the stroke. So I'm just telling you this so you get a picture. These people are not in denial. They actually do not know they are ill. So with our son, we were told, kick him out. Finally, we were told, kick him out of the house because he was getting worse and worse. And his symptoms were such, he could barely communicate. He was having delusional thinking, and he was just all over the place. So we were told the only way you're going to get him care is to kick him out of your house. Now, this is a police officers telling us this, and the conservatorship office. Now, if that isn't pathetic, just think of that. Think of if you were having chest pains and you needed treatment, and you were told, sorry, we don't have a bed right now. You're going to have to wait several weeks before we can get you a bed. And then, of course, what happens? Well, you have a heart attack and you're even worse, and your recovery is in question. That's what happens when your adult child gets a serious brain disease. You are told, the old saying, for every door that closes, one opens. Well, with this, it's every door is closed from the beginning. You're banging your head against the door. You're begging, you're pleading. And this is what happened to us. So finally, our son was homeless. And 6 months later, he did something that met our state's criteria for getting him treatment, which became a threat to himself or others. So he's picked up by the police. Now, just think of this. What if you're having chest pains and you would have to show that you are a danger to somebody else to get treatment? It's just ludicrous. So anyway, he ended up in jail for a year with no treatment. And I won't go through everything, but I will say this. He finally got the treatment that he needed. He finally got a caring doctor and people that were allowed him to take the time he needed to heal his brain with the proper medication. And now he is in a graduate program and he's doing very well. But I'll tell you something, it has really just been a horrible ordeal for our family. These are medical illnesses. The people that you're seeing on your streets, they probably had families. Many of them had families like ours. We're smart people. We know what we're supposed to do. Well, none of that works. And I really don't think the general public understands. These are not behavioral conditions. These are brain diseases. And they need the same type of treatment protocols and the same type of care from medical doctors that every other disease. This is the only disease that's discriminated this way. And as Paul said, we even have a federal policy that completely discriminates against people that have these diseases and makes it very hard to get a bed. And people need a bed and they need longer treatment to get stabilized. So when you're looking at your brothers and sisters that are homeless, Think of the story I just told you of my kid, who I never in a million years would think that it would come to that, all to try to get him treatment. And we need to end this flow, because serious mental illness or serious brain diseases are a direct pipeline to homelessness, incarceration, and the morgue. And it's up to our society. We need to wake up and smell the roses, and we need to do something about this so this doesn't keep happening to people who can be contributing members of society. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Linda, for your vulnerability and, you know, just being willing to tell us your story. And it's refreshing and encouraging to hear, you know, what your son went through, what you went through, and then where he is today. And so I'm excited to have many more testimonies like that by some policy changes here in Oceanside. Again, thank you so much. Our next speaker is an amazing young woman that I've actually gotten to know quite well over the last couple of years after being elected. And so our next speaker is Krista, and she's going to tell us her story and her testimony. So go ahead and take it away, Krista.
Hi, Chris. Thank you for having me on the panel today. As you know, my name is Krista. I'm 39 years old. I'm originally from Washington State. When I was 13 years old, I turned to the streets and addiction. Took me 20 years till I got clean. I just want to take you through what it was like being homeless for that long on the street and how I survived. So I panhandled many days. I lived on the side of the freeway. I dug in dumpsters. I manipulated people. I robbed people. I made people believe that I was this innocent girl from Washington State that needed help. I had a lot of people that asked me for help, gave me money, offered resources as far as like case management, but never did I have a, I don't even want to say a wraparound system. I think more what I needed was accountability. What it took for me to actually get clean was to go to prison. A lot of people don't agree with that, and that's okay. But for myself, I thought what I was doing in my addiction for 20 years was very normal. I thought everybody was using drugs. So there was nothing that was going to really get me off of the streets except for being incarcerated, hitting rock bottom. And at that point, I had a plan set up for me. A plan was put in place for me to where I could, sorry, my daughter's interrupting me. Excuse me. So anyways, when I was incarcerated, my mind was clear and I was set up to go to rehab. And after rehab, I went into a program here in North County where I was held accountable for everything. A plan was set up. I had counseling. I had gotten my health better. I'm sorry, I'm super nervous right now, but so yeah, that's what I needed. I know firsthand being out here on the streets with a lot of the homeless people. I believe that 80-20 thing is very, very accurate. I ran with the hardest of hard people out there, and I know that if I can get clean after 20 years, other people can too. It just takes a village to get there. It takes time, structure, a plan, accountability, everything. So that's all I have.
Thank you so much, Krista, for your courage and your vulnerability. You continue to amaze me with your story and your testimony. And I strongly believe that iron sharpens iron. And every time I hear you, I feel sharpened and encouraged to keep doing this. And so thank you so much for everything you do. Appreciate you. Our next speaker is a gentleman that I actually recently met by the name of Thomas Wolfe. He has an amazing story and testimony as well that might surprise some of you. And so I definitely want to hear from him. So go ahead and take it away, Thomas.
Thank you, Councilman Rodriguez, and thanks for everyone listening. I've been reading through the chats and the comments, and I know that this is a very divisive, very complex issue that people are very passionate about. So I'll tell you my story, and then I'm going to throw a few solutions out there to you. And some of them are, require an accountability aspect, and some of them require some compassion. And I think it's a formula that we have to work together on to find. So like Councilman Rodriguez said, my name is Thomas Wolfe. I'm a formerly homeless recovering heroin addict. I live in San Francisco. My story starts like this. I'm married. I'm a father. I have 2 kids. Back in early 2015, I had surgery on my foot, and I was prescribed oxycodone for the pain. So mind you, I was in my mid-40s already. And like I was saying before, I was a homeowner. I worked for the city and county of San Francisco, actually, as I had a county job. I had surgery on my foot. I was prescribed 10 milligram oxycodone tablets, and that bottle that they gave me was supposed to last me a month, 30 days. I finished that bottle in 10 days because I just liked the way it made me feel. So pretty soon I started popping 2, 3, 4, chewing on them, letting them melt under my tongue until I got just, euphorically high. So it did did the whole killing the pain thing, but it's also, I got high as a kite as well. So as I started running low, I started taking less because I was rationing out my oxycodone, and I started to feel sick. I started to go into withdrawal. And I called my doctor and I tried to get a refill, but it was too soon, so I couldn't. So I needed to, I made a decision to try to find where I could buy some on the street. So I actually looked it up on YouTube. I went to YouTube, where can I buy oxycodone pills on the street in San Francisco? And there were a few references to Pill Hill, which is in the Tenderloin, Golden Gate, and Leavenworth. So I rolled down there, and sure enough, I found 5 or 6 different people selling a variety of different oxycodone pills, from 30 milligram tablets all the way up to 80 milligram tablets, along with Percocet and Norcos, etc. And I started purchasing them there on the street at $30 a piece. So over the next 2 years, my addiction grew. At the peak of my addiction, I was taking 8 OP80, 80 milligram oxycodone tablets per day, which is 560 milligrams of oxycodone. If you took that amount today, you would die, which just goes to show you that as your tolerance does build when you use opioids, and as that builds, your addiction deepens. It gets worse and worse and worse, and you start getting dope sick, right? When you don't have enough. That's just the reality of it, of how it works. So I blew through about $100,000. I blew through all my savings. I stopped going to work, and they gave me an ultimatum: either come back to work or we're going to fire you. So I resigned. I quit my job, $80,000 a year county job. And I made the decision at that point, because of economics, to switch to heroin. So I walked a block down to Golden Gate and Hyde in the Tenderloin in San Francisco, and I bought a dime of heroin for $10. And I needed to figure out how to shoot that up. So I actually went back to YouTube, and I found an instructional video on how to shoot up heroin. And anyway, long story short, I have 24 scars on my body, and I'm not going to show them to you on this video. And I gave myself sepsis because I would miss, and then when I would miss, they would abscess, etc. And I ended up with sepsis, and I spent 6 days in intensive care and almost died. Now, you'd have thought that would have been enough, but that was not my rock bottom. At that point, I proceeded to start chasing the dragon, smoking heroin instead. So my addiction did continue even after my hospital stay. And one day I needed to buy some heroin. It was about 2 in the morning. I stole some money out of my wife's purse, hopped in the car, went down to the Tenderloin with the car, and I didn't come home for 11 days. I went on an 11-day bender out in the Tenderloin. And I was found by the police out there, and it was just funny. We talk about, police being, rousting homeless people and all that, and I understand why people are upset about sweeps and things like that. And there's been some legitimate cases of wrongful or cruel type of situations that have happened. But you have to understand, the police, when they rolled up on me, I had 30 pieces of used foil in my car. I had straws everywhere, right? Heroin residue on my hands, and they just told me to go home. They didn't arrest me. So I went home, and my wife was waiting for me with a packed bag saying, either you go to rehab right now, I've already made arrangements for you, or you need to get out. and I was in withdrawal at that moment. I was dope sick. I wasn't ready. So I left, and I proceeded to spend the next 6 months sleeping on the streets of the Tenderloin, in a doorway on a piece of cardboard, not in a shelter. I actually spent 2 days in a shelter. I left that shelter not because it was unsafe. I left that shelter because it was 5 blocks away from where I needed to score my heroin. It was too far for me to walk. That's why I left. So I spent the next 6 months out there. I ended up getting mixed up with the law because in my desperation to support my addiction and having been cut off from all money and finances, other than the general assistance I was getting from the county, I started holding drugs for the drug dealers out there on the street. And that worked for a couple of months until the police did a sting and I got arrested holding 4.5 ounces of heroin. And I just thought at that point that I was done, that I was going to go to prison. But they booked me in jail. I spent the night in jail, and the next day they released me on my own recognizance. And I was like, really? I just got arrested holding 4.5 ounces of heroin, and I walked out of jail the next day with no bail. I was just let out. And I went right back to the spot where I was at, and I proceeded to get arrested 5 more times for the same thing. It wasn't until the last, and those 6 times I got arrested was in a span of 3 months, from April to June of 2018. And the last time I got arrested, I did end up spending 3 months in jail, and that's where I got clean. Is there recovery in jail? No, there's no recovery in jail. Jail sucks, but I got clean. And I started looking at my options, and I was talking to my public defender. I called my brother for help, and he said, look, I can get you into a rehab, and I'll bail you out of jail if you go to rehab. At that point, I'd lost everything. My wife had placed a restraining order on me. I couldn't see my kids. I'd lost my job. I'd lost my house. I'd lost everything. I had no control. Everything that I had, my world had gotten so small, I was sitting between 2 cars smoking heroin on foil, and I still thought I had control. So once I was in jail, I really had no control. I proceeded to go to rehab. I spent the next 6 months in an inpatient rehab in San Francisco, where I was housed, clothed, fed, given 12-step counseling, all for free. Didn't cost $1. And yes, it was a faith-based 12-step program. It was the Salvation Army. But you know what? That program ended my homelessness. It ended my homelessness. I did not spend another day of my life since then sleeping on the street. So when we talk about what people need, do we need affordable housing? Sure, absolutely. But do we need to promote drug treatment and talk to people about drug treatment and work towards making drug treatment free or close to free as possible? Yes, absolutely. Do we need to talk about creating a separate pathway for individuals in recovery or people that have substance abuse issues to get the help they need? Absolutely. I saw a lot of comments in the chat that were very, people were very upset, and there are some things that Councilman Rodriguez in his presentation, I'll just be upfront, I didn't agree with everything that he said in there, but I do agree that we have to do something. Leaving someone to die on the street, and this is what's happening in San Francisco: 700 overdose deaths in 2020, 61 overdose deaths in January of 2021. 40% of those individuals were actually unhoused. They were homeless on the street. The rest of them were actually housed, and the majority of them were living in permanent supportive housing. That's a statistical fact. A statistical fact. And for context, when I was in recovery, I actually got a job as a case manager working in permanent supportive housing in San Francisco, working with long-term homeless and homeless veterans and everything. And I can tell you from personal experience, from the individuals that I worked with one-on-one for a year and a half, that the ones that were in recovery did better than the ones that had untreated addiction or untreated mental illness. And why were those addictions going untreated? Part of it was because of personal choice by the individual. Part of it was because of, the disease of addiction. It's denial, denial, denial. And part of it was because the resources just weren't there. So if you want to talk about we need to house the homeless and that will improve their situation, well, yes, if you move the goalposts all the way back to that point, it does improve their situation because they're not on the street anymore. But if you don't have any infrastructure in place to support those individuals, once they are housed, they just continue to struggle and struggle and struggle. And if you're someone that's struggling with addiction and you house them without any services, all you've done is isolate that addict. And that's the number one worst thing you can do for someone that's struggling with addiction, is to isolate them. They need support. They need to have a support system around them to help them do better, to help them get better. So in closing, there's some things that we need to do. We need to look at, you know, like the right to shelter laws like they have in New York would be something they should implement across California to give people those options. That's just the beginning. And then just creating a separate pathway, or a pathway to go alongside permanent supportive housing for people in recovery. Thank you. And thank you, Councilor Rodriguez.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for your testimony and going over that. Next, we are going to be speaking with Tim, who is with the San Diego Rescue, and he's going to be discussing their programs and experiences in dealing with their homeless shelter and how that works, and the you know, some of his viewpoints with respect to the way they work and housing first programs and restrictions.
Thank you, Councilman Rodriguez, and thank you, everybody. Your stories just inspire me, and it's why I feel like the Lord led me to be part of what I believe is a solution. Give you a little bit of my background. I don't have the history and the experiences that you have. My background really is from banking and finance. Up until 3 years ago, I thought my plan was to retire from banking and spend my years of retirement with my grandkids. And but I attend a local church here, and I'm on the board there. And our pastor is very passionate about serving our community and loving our neighbors. And I remember a few years back, I did have quite a few neighbors without homes who frequent my branch here in Oceanside, because it was in downtown Oceanside. And about that time, I had, it was the 3rd of the month when disability checks came. And so I had quite a few of those neighbors in the branch on that day. And on that day, I just remember God just putting on my heart, are you really happy just being their banker? And at that moment, I had to say no. And so I started volunteering at the Bread, and it was in March of 2018 that he compelled me to leave my position, and I started volunteering full time here at the Bread, which is now San Diego Rescue Mission North County chapter. And what I did though at that point, because I didn't really have the experience and background in homelessness, I didn't really know what I was getting myself into. So at the time, the Bread was operating a winter shelter here in the city of Oceanside, which allowed us to open 50 beds from November of each year till March of the following year, so for winter months. So that gave me about 8 months to kind of quickly understand what it was we were dealing with and what to expect. So I spent the next 7 or 8 months making every meeting I could possibly make, touring every facility I could tour. Paul was generous at the time to spend some time with me at his location. He was at Solutions for Change at that time. And I really spent a lot of time just going around, getting to know the experts and understanding what they were doing and what was working and what wasn't working. And I remember walking away actually concerned, because you have to understand, coming from banking, I operated on the P&L. We were, you know, we were a results-driven organization. I had to make sure that we drove results. And what alarmed me is that no one, at least at that time, Paul was probably the closest to give me some real answers, but nobody could tell me what was working. There was no true way to prove some of the policies and procedures that were in place were actually effective. That made me nervous, because I come from a life that says, why are we doing it? How effective are we? And let's review it and see what works and make changes to that. So I remember coming back and really praying and going through that and asking the Lord, what did you get me into? And I realized at that point, every meeting that I had gone to, the real topic always was housing, that we had a housing crisis. It was affordable housing. Housing was always the issue. We need more Section 8 vouchers. And that really led me to truly come to a conclusion that what our issue was not our homeless issue isn't a housing issue. Our homeless issue was a hopeless issue. So many of the people that I was starting to get to know had just given up. They quit. They didn't see any answers to any of their problems, and we were trying to give them solutions that really didn't address their issue. And so for me, when I started looking at the shelter system that we had at the time, we spent a lot of our resources, a lot of our time meeting people's needs. We met them right where they were at. We were meeting their needs. And what bothered me is that we didn't have a process in place that, as I've heard said here, where we had long-term accountability to address their needs. What really led them to where they were at? How do we resolve those issues, and how do we help them heal? And so when we became part of the San Diego Rescue Mission and their 65 years of history, what we were able to now bring to the community is that we operate a navigation center in San Diego which has 66 women and children that are there to check in every night. It is low barrier. However, you have to, on day one, set up with a case manager. And that case manager on day one begins to navigate where your next steps are to help you where you're at and where the next steps will to take you. That could be enrolling in our Mission Academy. We have a 12-month rehab recovery program that our students enroll in, and they're there for 3 semesters. And they have case management throughout the process. Or it could be that we navigate you into something that's more aligned with what you want. But what excites me about what we're seeing is that you're allowed to stay up to 30 days in the navigation center, but the average stay right now is 14 days. And what we're finding is that for the person who truly desires help, who wants help, who's working with a case manager and advocate, we can quickly get them to a place where they can start to transform their life. And so what we're experiencing is the ability to help people get to the next place. The thing that excites me is that we're doing this with no government money. We offer 300 beds currently in San Diego, half for men and women. We have a licensed preschool on site. So for those women who have children, we're trying to break the cycle of homelessness with the youth. So we're putting them in preschool and we're helping them so moms can work on their education and work on their finances and work on their hearts at the same time. And we also offer 150 beds for men at the same time, long term. So what I'm excited about is that we're able to not only just meet their needs through the navigation center, but we're also able to address their needs with their long-term accountability and long-term. We're also in the process of launching an initiative called Walk With Me. It's an aftercare program. It's a program where we're training volunteers. We're putting them through a series of training with trauma care and some of those other type of things that we need to equip them. And they will then walk with that person 12 months after they leave the program to ensure that they continue in their healing, and then we walk alongside them through that journey. So I've heard on here that accountability and long-term and a village. I agree with all of that. My experience what I'd like to share on the Housing First program, I don't want to really get anything negative about the Housing First program. I agree with Paul's comments, and I agree with Chris, and that in my opinion, it doesn't work for us. I don't want to be part of a program that forces me to operate in one way or another. Is there a lane for it? I believe there's a lane for it. I think it works for some people. But what I don't believe is that it should be a requirement that all to participate in some programs have to be part of a Housing First program. You know, we're currently right now, just to give you guys some hope, we will have a navigation center in North County. I would like to say it's going to be in Oceanside. We believe Oceanside is the place that needs it, but we are aggressively looking at locations right now. We just entered into a contract in National City where we'll build a navigation center there. It's in escrow now. And we hope that we can do that here in Oceanside. And we'd like to partner with the community and the city to be able to offer that. And the amazing part about it is we don't need city funds. We don't need the community to pay for it. We have the funds, and we just want to be part of the solution here. We know it's going to take all of us to do our part, but we feel like we can offer that to the community. And again, I thank each one of you. This is a tough subject, and you know what? It's the hardest thing I've ever done. It's the hardest work I've ever done. But you know what? At the same time, at the end of the day, when I hear stories like Krista and Linda and Tom, you know what? I'm just so thankful I get to be part of it.
Wow, thank you so much, Tim, and I look forward to partnering with you in what you guys do. I think it's absolutely impressive that without any government intervention, you guys are raising money as a nonprofit and meeting the needs that you were called to. And I totally respect that. And you guys have my full support. And I would love to sit down and talk about how we can work together to get you guys operating in North County, and particularly Oceanside. So thank you so much. So our next speaker is Oceanside's very own. I've gotten to know Vanessa probably over the last year and a half, and she has such an amazing heart. She has so much energy. She has an awesome story, and I look forward to getting to know her more. But she's moved on a program that I'll let her explain, and and we share a lot in common for some approaches we would like to take pretty quickly here in Oceanside to start addressing the homeless crisis. So spend a few minutes and just share what you're doing. I know you prepared something to state, and then we'll move into the final part of the webinar and then into Q&A. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for having me, and hello community. I appreciate being here. My name is Vanessa, and I am the founder of the Oceanside Homeless Resource. I do myself have 6 years clean, and I was homeless out on the streets. I did prepare something.
Oh, hold on. Hold on one second. I think you muted yourself. Sorry. Yeah.
I did. Thank you so much.
No, go ahead.
All right. Over the last 2 years, we have been combining our hearts with the community and truly bringing love to the ground to make a difference, because we are a people first program. We have a private shelter that we run out of different motels here in Oceanside and Carlsbad. And right now we do have 36 clients, including 6 children. We also have a transitional living house in Vista where we have 8 of our clients doing exceptionally well and moving forward. And over the past year, we've been able to work with private owners and open up housing for some of our families. And right now, 2 of them are in Section 8. We bring in programs, resources, and wraparound services to help this. But most importantly, we bring in supportive services, meaning God's love on the ground in our community. Once our clients move into permanent housing, we don't stop there. We have a group of life coaches throughout the county and other incredible community members that come on board to volunteer their time. We have been invited to be part of the Walk With Me program. And at the moment, we are in training to really be out there working with the community and walking alongside those that struggle. Again, we are for the people. We believe in people, and we understand that everyone is unique to their own trauma and where they have been. And hearts can change when they are given a place to grow and love. The Oceanside Homeless Resource became a nonprofit in May 2020, and I myself again was homeless. I care very much about our houseless neighbors and all of our community as well. I believe that it's important that we create solutions together and we talk about different ways to make it happen. Over at the Oceanside Homeless Resource, I believe in community. I believe in a safe spot where people can grow and be reminded of their self-worth, where they can transform and forgive themselves and truly be part of a program and community that helps them move forward. Every morning we get up and our shelter residents help make breakfast together. They do lunch and dinner. And we have a healing circle. We work with different organizations, churches, along with the city and the county and our community members to bring in different resources for every single person. We do not generalize. Everyone is unique to where they've been and the trauma that they've been through. After about a week in our program, we do ask our clients to be a part of what we're doing. And we ask them to show up and be part of our healing circle. And, you know, many times, which is awesome, is they come within the first 24 hours because they are given a space where they feel like they are part of something, which they are. Being homeless and being an addict, I absolutely understand what is needed in order to help someone move forward. It's a ripple effect of hope and love in a community. We do not enable. We ask that our clients get involved, and I do ask for voluntary drug testing. This is because I want to put together a safety plan and an action plan, and I want to know where they are, and I want to share my story with them and let them know where I've been and where I'm at today. We also work with different nonprofits for rental assistance and security deposits, and we do find that low-income housing is the most difficult to navigate for our seniors and our families, especially those that are on SSI and disability. We've been working really closely with our county, especially their outreach worker, Stephen Gonzalez. And we find that when you're in survival mode and you're living on the streets in an unsafe environment, you have no resources, and it becomes very dehumanizing, and you lose that love that you have for yourself. So, we are out here every day. We branch with Humanity Showers and also Sunny Street Outreach. We believe in community.
Oh, you're muted again. Sorry.
I'm so sorry. So, thank you. So we have some incredible hearts and nonprofits that are really bringing awareness to the success and what happens when you give someone a purpose and you create a work program within your program. I recently went up to LA to tour this amazing tiny home community, and what they've done there is so incredible. And Jordan from Humanity Showers and I are working together with a nonprofit in Oregon called Harbor of Hope. And it's just something that we need to take in consideration, because so many people have amazing solutions. And if we come together and realize that we can work together to build really somewhere where people are transforming, there's caseworkers within. That's what we do over at the motel. And, we do bring people off the streets. But again, we bring in what is necessary and the resources. I connect with all different nonprofits, churches, whoever will answer my call, community. I'll be like, I'm Vanessa, and this is what I'm doing, and I would love to work with you. Mental health. There's so many different people out there, and it's all unique to the trauma they've been through. So we also deal with trauma and harm reduction. We try to work with people all over San Diego County. So I just want to thank you again for having me here and letting me be part of this panel. And I appreciate all of you so much and your stories.
No, absolutely. Thank you so much, Vanessa. And I appreciate you. So I'm going to finish and discuss next steps in a plan, and then we'll move into the Q&A portion of the presentation. So I will move on sharing my screen again. One moment. One second. Trying to get to the right screen. Just one second, guys. Sorry. All right, here we go. Okay. All right, it's going to make me go through. Sorry about this. It had to reboot. So one second. Okay, so here's what has to happen in order for us to be effective. And again, there's not a one size fits all. I think we can all agree on that. We need help from everywhere in order to address this crisis, but we have to be strategic. We have to be smart. Nonprofits have the unique ability to raise money and be effective without a lot of rules and restrictions. When government gets involved, there's a lot of rules and restrictions. And when you mix those relationships, it can get pretty complex. And so I want us to focus our efforts and separate our efforts based on that 80-20 rule that we went over. We must create an intervention mechanism that offers a temporary shelter component. I think we all can agree that an individual, whether they're suffering from mental illness, whether they're suffering from domestic violence, whether they are addicted to drugs, whatever their situation is, we have to look at the temporary shelter component as a vetting station to understand each individual story and needs. They need a place to sleep. They need a place to shower, to eat. But it doesn't just end there. And so an example is if there's if homelessness was caused by an addiction, then we need to leverage this temporary shelter component to put the individual on a pathway that, you know, offers detox and treatment, life skills, job training. And this has to be in a drug-free environment. If someone's in recovery, you cannot be in an environment where individuals around you are actively using drugs. It doesn't work. And that's just one of many examples. If it's a mental health situation, then they need to get off the street. Hopefully they will agree to come off the street and onto a bed. And then a caseworker and a social worker, somebody who's an expert in this, can begin to address their concern and get a physician involved. And maybe it's a medication this individual needs to be on. So there's a lot of variables, but we have to have that catalyst, that vehicle, that location that's safe where they can be vetted. Having available shelter beds will not only allow us to meet the needs of each unique individual, but it will also allow Oceanside to enforce our vagrancy laws and remove illegal tent encampments on public property. So we'll meet the mandates and the requirement of the Supreme Court ruling. And so if a police officer, for example, was to approach somebody and offer them a shelter bed, and that individual refuses the help of a shelter bed, then at that point, we have the right to enforce our laws. And we should, because we must be a society of law and order. But we also must be able to provide the services to meet the needs. And lastly, regional jurisdictions must be on the same page. And Oceanside, as the third largest city in our county, we have the unique ability to take the lead by both a resolution and actions that bring our entire community results. That's what this is about. It's about being effective, and it's about being bringing results. All right, so we're going to talk now about the plan. And this is where all stakeholders have to come to the table and get involved. And I have a meeting tomorrow where we're going to be discussing some of this at tomorrow's council meeting. And so in brief, in short, the city of Oceanside, we're looking at a homeless shelter site. We're looking at a few to include the former Ocean Shores High School site located at 3131 Oceanside Boulevard. Please note that any location we do decide on, it will have to go through the public process before being approved. And that process can take up to 9 months. So even if we do move on Ocean Shores and we go through the public process and we eventually decide to open a shelter there, that process can take 9 months. Well, we've waited too long and we need an interim program. And so the program I want to present, and I want to have my colleagues on the council discuss, and I want the public to weigh in and hopefully support, is an interim hybrid hotel voucher program. Now, the unique thing about the program is it will require a hotel room or a hotel owner, the Oceanside Police Department and HOT team, and a nonprofit to cooperate all together. And this will meet the needs of, this will meet the needs of both offering a bed to sleep on, a shower, those important basic necessities, a safe environment, but also under the supervision of a nonprofit, it will also provide the structure and accountability to appropriately place each individual on a pathway to getting the help they need. So the unique thing about this program versus other hotel vouchers that are given out, for example, by the county, or hotel vouchers that are tied to housing first, it's literally just giving someone a voucher that's homeless and they go stay in a room. There's no wraparound services. There's nothing like, for example, what Vanessa was just discussing. She has rules and structure because she's privately funded through fundraising. She has rules, and some of those rules, I'll let her go into more detail on, but it's not a free-for-all. You're not just getting a free hotel room to do what you want. Yes, you're getting off the street. Yes, you're in a safe environment, but we also need to have a caseworker get to know you, get to know your story, and move you in the appropriate pathway based on your unique situation. And everybody's different. Everybody's different. And so if you want more information or to stay in touch, here's my website. Here's my Facebook page. And I'll exit out of this. And what time we have? So we are, it's 17 after. We're supposed to end by 7:30. So we're a little bit over schedule. But in essence, we need everybody to come on board as a community. There is a huge demand for emergency shelter beds. We're about 9 months away from actually having a shelter. So we need to move forward on emergency actions that would allow us and our Oceanside Homeless Outreach Team to manage vouchers in partnership with a nonprofit. The funding that we have available is not tied to Housing First. Because remember, Housing First, we can't, drug test or require a drug-free environment. We can't require, work for individuals that are capable at some point in time, obviously not on day one. So the funding is coming from our Inclusionary Housing Fund. We have about $9 million in that account. It's not tax dollars, which is amazing. It's actually fees that are paid for by developers that develop in our city to go toward anything that has to do with affordable housing. So homelessness fits under that umbrella. So we have the capacity to use these funds in a hybrid voucher fashion to get individuals off the street and to bring help and much needed help to our community with the services of a nonprofit and a social worker and a caseworker, getting people on a pathway. And we will also be able to enforce our vagrancy laws for individuals that don't want the help, they don't want a hotel bed, they don't want to come into a program. Then, we have every right under the law to make sure that we enforce our vagrancy laws. So it's a twofold approach until we have, Tim coming to Oceanside in our shelter bed, and we need the entire community to come around and support and provide feedback. So I'm going to open up for Q&A. I encourage the panelists to go ahead and read some of the questions and go ahead and start talking, read the question out loud, and then just answer it. And then make sure that you click the button that says answer live. So go ahead and have at it. Begin answering questions that you see in the feed.
Hi, Chris. I see a question here that says, don't you think that someone having a roof over their head and a safe place to sleep would help with their recovery and their healing? I think that to answer that question, if it's just a handout and just here's a place to stay and a place for you to continue using your drugs, I don't think that there would be any recovery or healing on their own. Recovery is a process. It doesn't happen overnight. It's a long-term commitment you have to make. You can't do it by yourself. You really do have to have a great support group and a plan set up to reach the goals, the end result.
Thank you for that. Vanessa, on the bottom, I just saw your comment. It's on the bottom underneath, like where you can mute in your video. There's a little box that says Q&A when it says like 46. You can just click that and read different comments or different questions.
For some reason, my bottom doesn't have anything like that, and I didn't know if I should close out and go back in. So just let me know if I can't see it. I'm so sorry.
No problem.
Yeah,
Let me.
I'm sorry. So if there's anything, I'm here.
Yeah. Anybody else? Let's answer some of these questions. We have about 10 minutes left.
Well, I'll say something on that too. I think it's very important to understand that yes, everybody does need somewhere to lay their head and have a safe spot. But it's important to bring in supportive services, build community. You know, a lot of times what's happening, because I was out there too, and I chose to do drugs later in life. I was 30. And so I had lived life and done a lot, and I had kids, and I just got divorced. And all of a sudden I became addicted to meth. You know, all of a sudden I lost my house and my family and my self-respect, my self-worth. And, you know, for what we're doing over there, and it's so important that you have to build people up. You do have to make them accountable, bring in God's love, a foundation, so that they want to continue to move forward and they see that self-love is a part of this process. So shelter is very important, but all those things go hand in hand.
Awesome. Thank you. I'm going to answer a couple questions. Number one, somebody wants to know if these slides will be available. Yes, this video was recorded. It will be posted on my Facebook page. And so go on my page and I will have it posted for future reference. And so hopefully that answers that question. Some individuals are completely against this coming to Oceanside. And you know, they don't want it here. A lot of constituents believe that if we build it, they will come. That's kind of the mentality and the concept. I originally thought that. But in doing a lot of due diligence, we're not providing a free-for-all. We're providing an option that's structured, a pathway that has rules for individuals that want help. And if they don't want help and they want to break our laws, then there's going to be consequences. And so this isn't a free-for-all. And so you have my word, and we have an amazing police department and staff. We want to work with the community to lower the impacts. I don't think anybody wants a community of tents on our streets, so this is a way to provide a safe environment and mitigate those impacts with a structured law and order approach. And so you will see that this is going to night and day help our community and move us in the right direction and help hundreds of lives.
Hey, Chris, I'd like to tag on that. I also saw comments that not in Oceanside. I think that you have to understand with what our goal is with a navigation center in North County. If it's not in Oceanside, that's fine. We'll put wherever we're welcome, we'll go. But the goal is to take people off the streets of the community that we're in and get them to a place where they can have long-term accountability and healing. And currently what we're proposing is a 50-bed navigation center, max stay 30 days. And for the ones that are ready to see their lives transformed, touched by God, move down, we're going to take them down to San Diego. So we're taking them to downtown San Diego to our facility there. So we will have them off the streets. And our goal is to, if their desire is to return a productive citizen of Oceanside, to then, once they're healed and ready, we will help house them here. But we hope to be a solution for Oceanside. But again, if the community would rather us go somewhere else, we're going to go to a community that's welcome what we want. And we believe that we offer something unique and that we have the funding in place and we are prepared to work with the community and the city. We want to love all neighbors, whether they have a home or they don't. I think the thing that we need to keep in mind, because again, I said I don't have a background in homelessness, but I'm mindful that, it wasn't that long ago that we had thousands of people up north displaced by fires. None of them ever expected to be in a shelter experiencing homelessness. So some people, yes, have made bad choices and find themselves in that place. But right now we see a lot of people who are on the verge of homelessness because of COVID by no decision made of their own. They're unemployed and their resources are running out. So, I don't want us to put everybody in the same category. So we hope that we can be part of the solution here. And I would love for any of you that are interested to sign up. We do tours of the mission in San Diego so that you can see our facility down there. We have a medical clinic on site. We have a therapist on site. We run people through a full process of healing. So that's all I had to say, Chris, on that.
Thank you. There's a question that says, why do you require the involvement of law enforcement for this proposed solution? because we're a society of law and order. And if we're going to use tax dollars or city funds on a program that's going to provide free hotel rooms for individuals that need it, there needs to be an approach that has structure. And that's why we're bringing in the nonprofit. Now, if we're providing these services for individuals that are homelessness and they don't want to follow our existing laws, then that's when the police step in and intervene and encourage them, go to the hotel bed, go to the emergency shelter. And if they don't want to, then they cannot legally have a tent and camp on public property. That's against the law. And so that's why the police department must be involved.
Chris, can I just add one thing?
Yep.
Sorry, Paul.
Okay.
So I just want to remind everybody that's listening out there that, everybody talks about permanent supportive housing or housing is the solution. But, housing doesn't happen tomorrow. It takes a year, 3 years, or 5 years for it to happen. So in the interim, we need to have something, because leaving people to wait on the street in tents, the end result is that many of them will not be alive to realize the housing that's going to come 5 years from now. So there needs to be something in the interim where we can help people get off the street and sleep in a bed. It's just a start, but it's better than just leaving them to their own devices on the street, because that will kill them. Thank you.
Somebody brought up a question about, okay, they're in a hotel room, but then they don't have food. We have a lot of resources when it comes to food, either donated from restaurants. Vanessa, can you touch base on the food dynamic and just the practical? Yeah, okay, they have a room. Now, how are they going to eat? Can you kind of address that briefly?
Sure. So what we've done over at our shelter is, we've been doing this for about a year, and we really just connected with the community, but different restaurants as well as the city of Oceanside. So right now we have lunches provided by the city of Oceanside and the Oceanside Kitchen Collaborative. And then we have our community members, including different groups, Institute for Equality, Jewish Collaborative Services, and then different community members that order and bring in food. So for us, because I'm privately funded, and we've been able to raise around, enough to keep people safe. And we have 20 rooms right now and 36 clients. So, that is a lot to feed. And then we have our transitional housing. But for us, we build relationships, right? We build relationships in our community and our city and our county. And that's how we have been able to provide food every single day and make sure people are nourished. And then we also partner with Brother Benno's, and we pick up sack lunches from them twice a week. And then I partner with Lucky Duck Foundation in San Diego, and I pick up supplemental meals. So we have volunteers that do this all week and go to different locations to pick this up. And then we deliver to different churches here, because we're all in this together, right? So we have to help each other. So that's what we've been doing on our end.
There's a lot of questions about individuals with mental illness and, how can we help them and keep them out of jail, et cetera. Remember, if somebody is on the street and our homeless outreach team can approach them with these vouchers, our goal is to get them off the street and in front of a caseworker that can interview them, figure out their needs and move from there. But if an individual does not voluntarily take a voucher, then there's nothing our police officers can do, because it's not illegal to be homeless. It's not illegal to be out on the street. But there is some items that are illegal. And that's when if you're, breaking the law with respect to dealing drugs or shooting up in public or propping a tent up on public space and trying to stay there overnight, like we've seen on Oceanside Boulevard, we're going to approach those individuals to get off the street. And once they're off the street, we're going to be able to organize them with the provider or services that is best for them, including mental health. That is so, so important. And so the pressure, so to speak, from our homeless outreach team saying, hey, you can't sleep there because we're offering you a bed, we're offering you resources. That's the hybrid approach, because it gives us a little bit more teeth, so to speak, to put pressure on individuals to get help. And so hopefully, we're not out there looking to arrest people. That is not our goal. Our goal is to get these individuals off the street and the help they need. And sometimes we need to have some pressure mechanism to move them in that direction.
I wanted to address a question that says, how do we keep seriously mentally ill people out of jail? And it's a great question, because right now, if people are seriously mentally ill and they're unhoused, unless it can be determined that they are, quote, gravely disabled, there is nothing that law enforcement or the public can do to remove them from decompensating on the street.
Yes,
But
yes.
there is an answer to how we keep seriously mentally ill people out of jail, and that is to provide them treatment and the appropriate types of housing that actually meets their serious illness and their needs. And that's why that's why myself and Linda have really been advocating for changes to the mental illness system and the way that we interact with folks who are suffering on the street because of mental illness and chronic addiction. The fact is, there's just not enough treatment. There are not enough beds, but there are ways that we can advocate for them so that the folks, our family members and our friends who are suffering from addiction and suffering from mental illness can be removed from the streets. And imagine if the only folks that the outreach workers had to deal with were the folks who were economically disadvantaged. That would be a huge benefit to our communities, because these more complicated issues we would actually be able to resolve and move them to the treatment and the housing that they require.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And just out of respect for time of the panelists and everyone, I'm going to go ahead and end this webinar. I want to thank everyone so much. If you registered for this webinar, I'm going to provide you instructions and access to this video so you can rewatch it and reference it. I'm also going to post it on my Facebook page. And I will also lastly provide you instructions on how to email the city council and how to participate in tomorrow evening's council meeting on this topic. And I'll give detailed instructions to participate on that. And you can speak on our Zoom council meeting, or you could just simply email council. So thank you guys very much. A round of applause for all of our